The cafeteria of Zerath Academy was a thunderous place, full of alien cadets chattering in a dozen tongues. Conversations overlapped with the screech of metal trays and the low hum of climate regulators. Every table was crowded, except one. Lira sat alone. She never rushed. She unfolded her utensils with precision, cut her food into neat portions, and ate quietly. Her posture was straight, her eyes steady. She gave no reaction to the way conversations hushed when she entered, or to the muttered comments that rippled through the hall like a current of disdain. Humans were rare here. The Galactic Council allowed them into the Academy under strict quotas, and only the most disciplined dared apply. Yet rarity didn't bring respect. "Look at her!" hissed a chittering voice from the next table, an insectoid cadet with shimmering mandibles. "Soft flesh, no armor, no claws." What was the council thinking? A reptilian cadet grunted agreement. They should have left the Deathworlders where they belong, on their feral rock. Lira didn't respond. She lifted a spoonful of broth, tasting it as though she hadn't heard. She always did this. Absorb the storm without reacting, let the barbs strike her skin and slide off. Her stillness was a weapon, though no one in the room realized it yet. That was when Corthan Drek entered. The reptilian towered above most cadets, broad chest gleaming under his cadet armor. Scaled ridges flared at his temples, a crown of arrogance. His eyes, yellow and predatory, swept the room until they found her. The laughter started before he even reached her table. He walked like he owned the hall, talons clacking on the polished floor. Cadets leaned aside, giving him space, their amusement already bubbling at the promise of a scene. "Ah," Corthan rumbled, voice rolling like thunder. "The tiny Deathworlder hides among us again." He planted a clawed hand on her table, leaning down so his breath washed across her face. The stench of raw meat clung to him. Lira placed her spoon carefully on the tray. She didn't look at him, only at her reflection in the broth. Corthan snarled. "Do you even speak human? Or are you just here to cower until graduation?" The reptilian cadets behind him roared with laughter. A crystalline being pulsed with mocking light, translating the jeer into yet another language so all could enjoy the spectacle. Lira finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes were not wide with fear, not narrowed with anger. They were calm, dark, sharp, unblinking. "Finished?" she asked softly. That quiet voice cut through the hall more effectively than any shout. For a moment, the jeering stopped. Corthan blinked, then barked a laugh. "You have spirit, little Deathworlder, but spirit doesn't keep bones from breaking." He curled one talon into the table, gouging a line across the metal. Sparks flickered. "Your kind is fragile. You're tolerated here only because the council thinks it amusing." The reptilian leaned closer until his crest nearly brushed her hair. "When I decide to end you, no one will stop me." Lira didn't move. She resumed eating, chewing with the same measured calm. The laughter returned, louder, crueler. To the watching cadets, she seemed defeated, humiliated. To Corthan, her indifference was fuel, but a few noticed something else. The insectoid cadet who had mocked her earlier tilted his head, antennae twitching. There was no trembling in her hands, no flinch in her posture. She wasn't ignoring Corthan because she was afraid. She was ignoring him because she chose to. The moment passed. Corthan straightened, disgusted. "Pathetic!" he spat and stomped away, his entourage following. Lira finished her meal in silence. Later in the training arena, the same dynamics unfolded. Cadets of every species practiced in their squads. Weight machines adapted to gravitational tolerances, obstacle courses shifted configurations, and holographic projectiles sliced through the air. The arena was chaos, filled with roars, shouts, and flashes of energy. Lira trained alone. She worked methodically, adjusting resistance bands, climbing walls without complaint, her breathing steady. Others mocked her again. "Watch her stumble," a crystalline cadet whispered as she sprinted the incline run. "Her legs will snap," yet she didn't stumble. She finished each course slower than some, faster than others, but always with precision. She never collapsed, never begged the machines to adjust intensity. When she finished, Corthan was waiting. "Well, little Deathworlder," he growled, circling her. "You survived another day. Perhaps you're tougher than you look." His grin widened, rows of serrated teeth gleaming. Or perhaps you're just too stupid to quit. His companions laughed again. Lira pulled her training harness off, folded it, and set it neatly aside. She met his gaze just once, her expression unchanged. "You talk too much," she said. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even sharp. But something in her tone, flat, deliberate, made a few cadets fall silent. Corthan bristled, but before he could strike back, the drill master entered, a towering avian with steel feathers. Squads dismissed. The moment broke apart. Cadets dispersed, chatter rising again. Corthan glared at her, promising retribution with his eyes. Then he left. Lira lingered only long enough to record her training stats. She walked to the exit alone, her steps unhurried, her shoulders straight. That night in the dormitories, whispers spread. "She never reacts," one cadet muttered. "She must be terrified," another replied. "No," the insectoid said quietly. "She's waiting," the others scoffed, but unease lingered. The insectoid had felt it, the razor edge hidden under her calm. In her bunk, Lira lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't afraid of Corthan. She wasn't even angry. She understood him perfectly. Predators like him mistook silence for weakness. They believed dominance came from volume, from claw marks gouged into metal. But humans had grown up on a planet where silence was survival, where storms flattened forests without warning, where predators struck unseen in the night. Restraint was not weakness. It was patience, and patience was deadly. The zero-gravity chamber was alive with movement. Training drones whirled between cadets, firing bursts of light that stung like hornet strikes. Alien recruits darted, clawed, or spun through the air, their bodies adapted to the weightlessness. Lira floated at the edge of the arena, adjusting the straps on her boots. She entered the field calmly, pushing off the wall with a measured kick. The drones immediately locked onto her, red sensors flashing. "Target acquired, human cadet," the system's voice echoed. Energy bolts hissed through the air. Lira twisted her body, ducking her head as a burst skimmed past. She grabbed a railing, used the momentum to swing, and launched herself into another cluster of drones. Her strikes were sharp, not powerful but precise. One after another, the drones blinked out. From the observation ring above, laughter erupted. "She moves like she's drowning," one cadet jeered. "Fragile little bones, she'll break in half." Another howled. Lira ignored them. Her breaths came steady, her motions efficient. Then Corthan entered. His scales gleamed under the chamber lights, his heavy form fitted with mag anchors that clamped into the rails. He looked more like a siege engine than a cadet. His voice boomed through the comms. "Clear a path! I'll show you how real warriors train." The arena hushed, anticipation thick. He launched forward, tearing through drones with claws and brute force. Each strike sent fragments scattering like sparks. His audience roared approval. Then he angled toward Lira. The drones didn't recognize rivalry. They kept firing. But Corthan swatted them aside as he barreled into her space. His bulk slammed into her trajectory, knocking her against a wall. The room erupted in laughter. "Careful, Drek! You'll snap her spine!" someone shouted. Lira steadied herself, floating upright. Her jaw tightened, but her eyes stayed calm. "Stay out of my way," Corthan sneered, his crest flaring. "You crossed into mine," she replied evenly. The words weren't loud, but they carried. Even the drones seemed to pause as cadets leaned closer to the glass, hungry for escalation. Corthan grinned, baring his teeth. "Bold talk for something so breakable?" He shoved off a rail, body slamming past her, deliberately grazing her shoulder. The impact spun her sideways. She caught herself on a handle, repositioned, and resumed fighting the drones. She did not retaliate. The watching cadets booed her restraint. "She doesn't even fight back," one jeered. "Cowardice," another muttered. Corthan's grin widened. He had the crowd, and he knew it. Later, in the mess hall, the incident echoed like wildfire. Corthan retold the story with grand gestures, miming how she had spun helplessly in zero-G. His entourage laughed on cue, pounding the tables, scales flashing in approval. "She's like a hatchling dropped in deep water," he roared, claws scraping across his tray. Flails, gasps, and clings to rails like a drowning worm. The hall shook with laughter. Lira sat at her usual table, spoon poised above her stew. Her face betrayed nothing. Corthan spotted her silence and strode over, flanked by his reptilian peers. He loomed above her, shadow blotting out the lights. "Still quiet, little Deathworlder?" he growled. "Still hiding behind that calm mask?" He slammed his claw onto her table, rattling her tray. Broth spilled over the rim, sliding across the metal surface. The laughter hushed into expectant silence. Every eye in the hall locked on them. Corthan leaned closer, voice dropping to a taunting whisper. "Tell me, human, when the raiders slaughtered your colony, did you sit still like this? Did you watch your kin bleed and stay silent? Or did you scream before they tore them apart?" The words hit like a strike to the gut. For the first time, her hand froze above her food. The room tensed. They all knew her story. Earth colonies raided, families shattered, but it was a forbidden subject. No one dared mention it aloud. Only Corthan. Lyra's eyes lifted slowly. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Be careful what you touch, Drek." A ripple of unease swept through the onlookers. It wasn't the volume, but the weight of her tone, measured, deliberate, a warning buried in stillness. Corthan chuckled, baring his teeth. "Or what?" He pressed a taloned hand onto her shoulder, testing. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Her spoon clinked against the bowl as she set it down. "Remove it," she said. The hall held its breath. Corthan squeezed harder, claws pricking through the fabric. His grin widened. "Weakness all the way down," the watching cadets muttered, some amused, some uneasy. A crystalline cadet whispered, "She's going to snap," but the reptilian beside him laughed. Still, she didn't move. Her breathing remained steady. She reached for her tray, lifted it calmly, and slid out from under his grip. Without a glance back, she walked to the sanitation chute and set her utensils inside. Then she left the hall in silence. The crowd erupted. "She ran away!" a voice shouted. "Pathetic," another added. But beneath the laughter, some exchanged wary glances. Not because she fled, but because of what she didn't do. No trembling, no collapse, no fear, restraint again. And restraint unsettled them more than violence ever could. That night, Corthan gathered his supporters in the dormitory commons. His laughter echoed against the steel walls. "She won't last," he told them. "Tomorrow I'll make her scream. The Deathworlder facade will crack." His companions howled approval, already savoring the spectacle. But one voice didn't join. The insectoid cadet from earlier clicked his mandibles uneasily. "Careful, Corthan. Silence is not surrender." "Sometimes silence waits," Corthan sneered. "Your kind hides behind riddles." "Mine crushes bones." The reptilian cadets pounded their fists in agreement. The sound reverberated through the walls like drums of war. In her quarters, Lira sat on her bunk, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes lingered on the faint scars along her knuckles, souvenirs from a harsher world. Corthan thought her silence weakness. The others thought her calmness surrender. They didn't understand. Earth had taught her patience the hard way. You didn't waste energy fighting every insult, every storm, every predator. You waited. You endured. And when the time was right, you struck once, precisely, decisively. She lay back, staring at the ceiling. Her lips moved, whispering words too soft for anyone to hear. "Tomorrow, then." Her voice was calm, almost tender, but her eyes were cold. The mess hall was unusually quiet that evening. Word had spread. Corthan was going to finish what he'd started. Cadets from every wing crammed into the long chamber, trays untouched, voices hushed with anticipation. Lira entered last. She carried her food with the same deliberate calm as always, her steps unhurried. She crossed the crowded hall as if it were empty and sat at her usual place, the lone table at the far end, fork, knife, spoon. She laid them out neatly, then began to eat. The crowd shifted. Whispers moved like a current through the room. Eyes flicked between her and the wide doors. When they opened, Corthan filled the frame. He looked pleased with the attention, crest flaring, scales catching the light. His entourage followed, their laughter already rehearsed. He swaggered down the aisle, cadets parting instinctively, giving him room. Every step echoed, loud and deliberate. He stopped before her table. "Well," he said, voice carrying through the silence, "the little Deathworlder still plays at being calm. How many more days will you pretend silence makes you strong?" Lira didn't look up. She cut her food, chewed, swallowed. The silence stretched. Corthan's grin faltered. He slammed his claws on the table, rattling her utensils. "Look at me when I speak to you." At last she raised her eyes, calm, steady. "You're boring me." Gasps rippled across the hall. Some cadets chuckled nervously, others shifted, uneasy. Corthan's jaw tightened. "You dare?" He leaned closer, his bulk looming over her, shadow blotting her tray. "Do you think hiding behind words makes you dangerous? You are weak, human. Your species survives by accident, not strength. You sit here, still and small, because you know one push will break you." His claws dug into the table, carving deep grooves. "So I'll give you that push." He placed one hand on her shoulder, heavy and deliberate. The gesture was no longer a joke. It was possession, humiliation, a public declaration of dominance. The hall froze. No one laughed now. Lira's voice was soft, almost kind. "Remove your hand." The warning carried no tremor. No raised tone. "Just certainty," Corthan sneered. "Or what?" His grip tightened. The moment stretched thin, brittle as glass. Then it shattered. Her hand moved, swift and precise. She grasped his wrist, twisted her body slightly, and shifted the angle of her weight. Crack! The sound cut the hall in two. Corthan staggered, eyes wide, body seizing. His crest jerked sideways at an unnatural angle. For a heartbeat he remained upright, frozen in shock. Then he collapsed, sprawling across the floor, limbs twitching before falling still. The hall went silent. Dozens of cadets stared, unblinking. Utensils hung in midair, forgotten. Even the climate system seemed to hush, the usual hum swallowed by the weight of the moment. Lira remained seated. She smoothed her sleeve where his claws had pressed, then calmly set her fork back on the tray. Her breathing never quickened. She looked around the hall, meeting eyes one by one. "I warned him," she said quietly. The words carried more force than a shout. They threaded through the silence, undeniable. A crystalline cadet flickered with nervous light. An insectoid's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Reptilian cadets shifted uneasily, their scales rattling. Lira continued eating. Bite, chew, swallow. As though nothing had happened, as though a body wasn't sprawled across the floor at her feet. Whispers began to rise, hesitant at first, then spreading. She never stood. "Did you see how fast?" One motion. Fear threaded through the awe. The laughter that once followed Corthan was gone. In its place came silence, respect, and a deep, unsettled wariness. Corthan's supporters slowly edged back. None stepped forward to help him. None dared touch him, not with the image of that single fluid movement burned into their minds. The insectoid cadet who had watched her closely from the start leaned toward his companions, voice low. "I told you." Silence wasn't surrender. It was waiting. Lira finished her meal. She wiped her utensils, stacked her tray, and stood. Her chair scraped lightly against the floor, the loudest sound in the hall since the snap. She walked past Corthan's body without looking down. At the door, she paused and turned, her gaze sweeping the hall once more. "This is restraint," she said. "Remember it." Then she left. The aftermath spread through the academy like wildfire. Cadets whispered in dormitories, retold the scene in training halls, and replayed the sound of the crack in their minds. Some spoke with reverence, others with dread. The reptilians were unsettled most of all, their strongest humbled by a girl who had not even stood. The instructors did not intervene. Officially, no record of violence existed, only a cadet's overconfidence ending in misfortune. But the silence of authority was its own message. This was the natural order of things. Lira's reputation shifted overnight. Where once she was mocked for stillness, now silence followed her wherever she walked. Conversations hushed when she entered. Cadets moved aside without thought. No one laughed. Some called her dangerous. Others called her monster. A few whispered the old word, Deathworlder. She never corrected them. In her quarters, she sat alone again. The quiet felt heavier now, tinged with the weight of eyes that would never see her as fragile again. She thought of her family, the colony, the raiders. She thought of storms that leveled forests, predators that struck without warning. Earth had taught her long ago, patience was survival. Control was strength. She had not wanted to show it here among cadets who thought violence was proof of power. But Corthan had demanded the demonstration, and she had given it with precision without flourish. Now they knew. She lay back on her bunk, hands folded behind her head. The station lights dimmed, signaling night cycle. Her lips curved, not into a smile but into something colder, steadier. They would never mock her silence again. The next morning, the academy felt different. The corridors, once buzzing with careless chatter, now carried a muted tension. Cadets moved in clusters, glancing toward the human girl whenever she passed. Lira walked alone, as always. Her uniform was sharp, her stride even. She carried no trace of triumph. No smirk, no hint of satisfaction. Only the same measured calm that had unsettled them before, but now carried weight. The sound of Corthan's neck snapping still haunted the halls. In the combat theory amphitheater, the instructor entered, feathers sharp as blades, eyes unreadable. He perched on the podium scanning the cadets. "Today," the avian announced, "we discuss restraint." "Define it," murmurs rippled across the room. The word was no longer abstract. It had shape, sound, and a human face. A crystalline cadet pulsed light nervously. "Restraint is choosing not to act." The instructor's head tilted. "Wrong. Restraint is knowing you can act, but holding until it matters. Anything less is cowardice." Dozens of eyes shifted toward Lira. She sat still, gaze fixed on the front, hands folded on her desk. She didn't flinch at their stares. The instructor's feathers rattled softly, the avian equivalent of a smile. "Good. Lesson over." He dismissed them without another word. Cadets shuffled out in silence. Whispers followed her, sharper than before. She proved it. She didn't even stand. Restraint. They'll never forget. Lira ignored them. She wasn't interested in shaping legends. She only wanted to survive this place without becoming what they accused her of. But the choice was gone. Her silence had already transformed into something larger than herself. That evening in the training yard, groups sparred under the glow of hovering drones. The reptilian contingent trained with visible aggression, their movements clipped and frustrated. None mentioned Corthan's name, but his absence was a shadow at their backs. One finally broke from formation and stalked toward her. His scales were darker, his eyes burning. "You killed him," he said flatly. Lira adjusted the straps on her harness, expression neutral. "He's alive. Medical confirmed it. He'll never fight again." The reptilian snapped, neck ruined. "You might as well have killed him." She met his glare without blinking. "He touched me after I warned him not to." "He made his choice," the cadet snarled, crest rising. "You dishonored him." Lira tilted her head slightly. "He dishonored himself." The words struck harder than claws. The reptilian's nostrils flared, but he didn't move. Something in her tone, steady, certain, froze him in place. He retreated, muttering curses, but didn't strike. Others had watched. They saw his hesitation, his retreat, and the quiet human who stood her ground without raising her voice. Later, in the infirmary, Corthan lay strapped to a med bed. Tubes ran from his throat, supports braced his ruined spine. His eyes burned with fury when Lira stepped into the doorway. "You?" His voice was a rasp, broken but venomous. "You stole everything." She didn't approach the bed. She stood just inside the door, hands loose at her sides. "You stole it yourself," she said. "I told you to stop." "You didn't!" His crest shivered with rage. "They whisper your name now. Deathworlder, monster. You wanted this." Her gaze sharpened. "No, I wanted peace. You forced this on me." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Machines beeped, fluid hissed. Then she added, quieter, "You won't touch anyone again." "That is enough." She turned and left. Corthan's roar, cracked and broken, followed her down the hall. In the dormitory common room, the insectoid cadet approached her. His antennae twitched nervously. "You warned him," he clicked. "Yes. You could have stopped him other ways." She studied him, calm. No, he wouldn't have listened. He believed violence was strength. The only way to teach him was to show restraint until the moment mattered. The insectoid clicked again, uneasy. "You terrify them." "I don't want their fear," she said. Too late. He retreated, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Days passed. The academy adjusted, but the balance had shifted. Instructors began using her name as example. Cadets trained harder in her presence, wary not to test her patience. Even the reptilians grew quieter, their mockery subdued into sullen glares. Still, isolation deepened. No one sat with her in the hall. No one spoke casually. She had become a symbol, respected, feared, but untouchable. One night, she stood by the viewport overlooking the academy's orbit. The planet below swirled with oceans and storms, alien and alive. Silence pressed heavy. She thought of Earth, of forests that bled green after fires, of predators that stalked without sound, of storms that destroyed and yet gave life again. Her people had endured it all, and now she endured here. But the cost was clear, solitude sharpened by reputation. Behind her, a voice broke the silence. "You're not what they say." She turned. The insectoid again. He hesitated at the threshold, antennae bent low. "You're not monster," he said. "You're proof. Proof of what?" she asked. "That silence can hold more power than roars." She studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. It wasn't friendship, not yet. But it was acknowledgement, and perhaps the first crack in her isolation. Weeks later, drills resumed with intensity. Lira trained as always, steady, precise, efficient. She ignored the stares, ignored the whispers. But now, when Corthan's name surfaced, cadets didn't laugh. They remembered the sound of bones snapping, the stillness of a human girl who had warned, waited and acted once. And deep down, beneath fear, they understood something terrifying. The galaxy had called Earth a Deathworld. They had laughed at fragile bones, mocked soft flesh. But they had seen the truth now. Deathworlders didn't need strength of scale or claw. Their strength was patience, control, and the precision to end a fight before it began. And Lira, sitting quietly, had shown them all.